Welcome back to another episode of Opalwave MTG, a channel dedicated to exploring power levels in EDH and helping you tune your deck to your meta. I'm your host Jacob, and today we're going to be looking at Adrix and Nev Twincasters, which is a blue and green creature merfolk wizard with Ward 2, so if this creature becomes a target of a spell or ability an opponent controls, counter it unless that player pays an additional 2 mana. If one or more tokens would be created under your control, twice that many of those tokens are created instead. And I want to shout out to Harold for recommending that I do this deck tech. They requested that I didn't use Avenger of Zendikar, Parallel Lives, or Doubling Season because it just feels like all the decks run those cards. And so I took it a little bit further and I thought to myself, how can I make this a super unique deck that probably hasn't been done? Yeah, I went really weird with it, with basically focusing on artifacts instead of just the creatures that you would normally see in Adrix and Nev. As usual, the deck lists are in the description below, and with that, let's go ahead and get started. So starting with the Skirmish version, I decided to do Mirror Tribal. It's primarily artifacts, but we're gonna use Mirror and kind of play on the synergies here. There is one card that you probably see in a good bit of Adrix and Nev decks, and that's going to be this Mirror Battlesphere, but we're going Mirror Tribal, so I thought I would use it anyway. When it enters the battlefield, you create 4 1/1 colorless mirror artifact creature tokens, and when it attacks, you can tap any number of mirror. If you do, Mirror Battlesphere gets +X+0 till end of turn and deals X damage to the player or planeswalker it's attacking. So a very strong card in the context of Mirror Tribal. With the creatures, we've also got stuff like Alloy Mirror, Copper Mirror, Lodestone Mirror can get bigger by tapping your mirror. More mirror mana dorks, more or less, with the Palladium Mirror. Mirror Welder is a super cool one where you can exile an artifact card from your graveyard and it gains all the abilities of the cards exiled with it. So it's kind of like a Necrotic Ooze, but a mirror. So pretty cool. Mirror Retriever. We've got the Mirror Propagator, which has pay 3 and tap it, put a token that's a copy of Mirror Propagator into the battlefield. So, I mean, with this and Adrix and Nev, you'll make 2 Mirror Propagators, and then depending on how much mana you have, you can just keep making more Mirror Propagators and just have a lot of fun with it. Another cool one is the Golden Guardian. So it's got pay 2. Golden Guardian fights another target creature you control. When Golden Guardian dies this turn, return it to the battlefield transformed under your control. And this is going to flip into a land, which has pay 4, tap it, create a 4/4 colorless golem artifact creature token. So with Adrix and Nev, we're basically paying 4 mana to make 8 power worth of creature, which is pretty good. Another really cool one is the Mishra's Self-Replicator. It's an assembly worker, and whenever you cast a heroic spell, so a legendary spell, an artifact, you can pay 1, and it will create a copy of Mishra's Self-Replicator. So again, with the Adrix and Nev, you'll make 2 of these guys, and then from there, you can just keep making more and more tokens, and it gets kind of crazy. It's a lot cheaper to activate than the Mirror Propagator, but has a little bit more in the startup cost because it's 5 mana. Just some more mirror. Perilous Mirror, when it dies, deal 2 damage to a creature. Parcel Mirror can draw you cards. Then we've got the Worm Coil Engine, another card that you probably see in a good bit of Adrix and Nev decks, but still a really cool addition, especially since we're on this like artifact tribal kind of thing. Another really cool card is the Replication Specialist. It's a new card from Neon Dynasty. So whenever a non-token artifact enters the battlefield under your control, you may pay 2. If you do, create a token that's a copy of that artifact. So with this guy, we can make copies of any of our creature artifacts or any of the artifacts we have in our artifact section here. We've got a good bit of really sweet cards that we can copy. And then Sharding Sphinx. Whenever an artifact creature you control deals combat damage to a player, you may create a 1/1 blue Thopter artifact creature token with flying. So with Adrix and Nev, this can get out of hand really fast. Moving on to the sorceries, we've got a Distant Melody. So you choose a creature type and draw a card for each permanent you control of that type. And since we're on this mirror tribal kind of thing, we can just name mirror and we'll draw a card for each mirror we control. Echo Storm, another really interesting one. So this is going to get copied for each time you've cast your commander from the command zone and you create a token. That's a copy of target artifact. So this card has a lot of potential to make a lot of tokens in this deck. Then we have Thoughtcast, which affinity for artifacts, draw 2 cards, just a way for us to get some card draw. With the instants, Aether Spouts, I really like this card, especially when if your meta is really combat heavy. For each attacking creature, its owner puts it on top or the bottom of their library. So instead of putting it into their hand, they gotta either put it on top and really, jam up their draws, or put it on the bottom and they won't see it again unless they shuffle or tutor. A few removal spells: counter spell, Beast Within, Crossing Grip, Pull from Tomorrow, a pretty decent draw spell. And we've got the Supplant form. I think this card is really cool. It's 6 mana, but you get to bounce a creature to its owner's hand and you get a token copy of it. So with Adrix and Nev, you'll get 2 of those creatures. So it could be pretty backbreaking depending on what you bounce to your opponent's hand. Second Harvest, for each token you control, put a token onto the battlefield that's a copy of that permanent. This card can also do some pretty crazy shenanigans depending on what your board state is looking at, like. And then we've got the Sublime Epiphany, just a really great card for 6 mana. Lots of different modes, and you can choose all the modes if you want to. All of them are pretty relevant for what we want to do here. We can make a token, we can draw cards, we can bounce stuff, counter spells, it does everything. Moving on to the artifacts. A few ramp spells like the Arcane Signet, Midnight Clock can let us reset our hands. Just some more ramp like Cinematic Cluestone. I really think Skyclave Relic is cool. If you pay the kicker cost, you make 2 tapped tokens of it that are tapped. Replicating Ring can also make copies of itself once it gets to 8 counters on it, especially if you're playing this like kind of slow grinder kind of games. This could definitely do some crazy stuff. Sika's Chariot. When it enters the battlefield, you make 2 green creature tokens, cat creature tokens, and when it attacks, you make a copy of target token you control. More ways for us to make copies, like the Minion Reflector. So whenever a non-token creature comes into play under your control, you may pay 2. If you do, you make a copy of that creature. So with Adrix and Nev, you'll make 2. Mirrorworks is basically the same thing, but this only works for artifacts. And the cool thing about Mirrorworks is you get to keep those artifacts indefinitely, as opposed to the Minion Reflector, where you have to sacrifice those permanents at the end of turn. A few more ways for us to make tokens. We've got the Prototype Portal and the Soul Foundry, which are kind of opposites of each other. One, you exile an artifact card from your hand, and the Soul Foundry, you exile a creature card from your hand, and then you pay that card's cost and tap it to make a token. So with our Adrix and Nev out, we're going to make 2 of those tokens. Pretty good value. A few ways for us to kind of reanimate stuff. Soul Separator, pay 5, sack it, exile target creature from your graveyard, put a token into the battlefield that's a copy of that card, except it's a 1/1, it's a spirit in addition to its other types, and has flying. And then you make a zombie creature token as well. And then we also have the Dollhouse of Horrors, which kind of does the same thing, where you exile a creature card from your graveyard, you create a token that's a copy of the exiled card, except it's a 0/0 construct artifact in addition to its other types, and it has this creature gets +1/+1 for each construct you control. It gains haste until end of turn. Activate only as a sorcery. This card could actually get kind of crazy with Adrix and Nev. Just continue to make all these constructs that just keep getting bigger, especially since you get additional ones because of Adrix and Nev. Gold Vein Pickaxe and Prying Blade both make treasures when you connect to an opponent with combat damage, so pretty cool. Idol of Oblivion, you can draw a card if you've created a token this turn, which is not too hard in this deck. And then you pay 8 and you sacrifice Idol of Oblivion to make a 10/10 colorless Eldrazi creature token. So could definitely do some pretty crazy stuff, especially if we have tokens of the idol. It could just get crazy. Mirror Reservoir, a pretty cool one. Add 2 mana to your mana pool. Spend this mana only to cast mirror spells or activate abilities of mirrors. Since we've got a lot of mirror in the deck, thought it'd be cool to throw it in. We can also return mirror cards from our graveyard to our hand. So a great way for us to recur stuff. Then we've got the Mirror Turbine, which taps to make a 1/1 mirror. And then we can tap 5 mirror and it to search your library for a mirror card and put it in the battlefield. So more ways for us to do stuff with our mirror tribal. A really odd one is the Shrine of Loyal Legions. So at the beginning of your upkeep or whenever you cast a white spell, put a charge counter on Shrine of Loyal Legions. And then you can pay 3 and tap it, sack it, and you make a 1/1 colorless mirror artifact creature token for each charge counter on Shrine of Loyal Legions. And there is no white in this deck, but the potential for this card to make a lot of tokens could be pretty big, especially if you have, if you cast this early on in the game and the game's going on for a while, or if you even make copies of it, that could also do some pretty crazy stuff. Titan Forge, another card that we can use to end the game. So pay 3, put a charge counter on Titan Forge, and then we remove 3 charge counters from Titan Forge to make a 9/9 colorless artifact golem. So pretty good. Moving on to the enchantments, got Mechanized Production. So enchant artifact you control, and at the beginning of your upkeep, create a token that's a copy of enchanted artifact. Then if you control 8 or more artifacts with the same name as one another, you win the game. Adrix and Nev, this potentially only takes 4 turns, as opposed to the usual 7 turns that you would need, because you'll be making the extra token every turn. And that's not even including, some of our other ways to make tokens like the Mirror Works, or potentially one of these the prototype or the Soul Foundry, depending on how you've got it set up. Then we've got Mirrored and Besieged, which you could choose one. You can either choose the Mirren whenever you cast an artifact spell, create a 1/1 colorless mirror artifact creature token, or at the beginning of your end step, draw a card, then discard a card. Then if there are 15 or more artifact cards in your graveyard, target opponent loses the game. So our 2 enchantments here have some really interesting win the game, lose the game clauses, but there's a good bit of hoops that we got to get through in order to make that happen. Then we've got the lands. Nothing crazy going on here. Blighted Woodland, pretty decent land for ramping. Got a good bit of basics. We're on 2 colors, so we don't need to worry too much about that. Mirror Pool, super great card. Enters tapped, unfortunately, but taps out of colorless. Or you can pay 3, including a colorless mana specifically, and you can sacrifice Mirror Pool, copy target instant or sorcery spell you control. You may choose new targets for the copy, or you can pay 5, including a colorless, to create a token that's a copy of target creature you control. So with Adrix and Nev, you're going to get a pretty good value out of this card. Moving on to the battle version of Adrix and Nev, we've added an Oko, Thief of Crowns. He makes food tokens when you plus them up, so you make 2 of those foods. Then you can essentially turn something into an elk, whether it be one of the food that you made or someone else's creature if they've got a creature that you want to get rid of. Or you can -5 to exchange control of target artifact or creature you control, and target creature and opponent controls with power 3 or less. So not bad value that we can get out of the Oko. Moving on to the creatures, we've added another kind of replication specialist to the deck with Bramble Sovereign. It only works for creatures, but we've got plenty of creatures that we can hit with this Bramble Sovereign. So essentially, when a non-token creature enters the battlefield, you pay 2. If you do create a creature token that's a copy of that creature, should be noted that this can this triggers for anyone's creatures. So if you want to do some politics and like give someone an extra creature, you could, but most of the time you're going to want to just copy your own creatures. Then a really cool ad, we've got this Cogwork assembler. So for 7 mana, we create a token that's a copy of target artifact. That token gains haste. Exile it at the beginning of the next end step. So this makes tokens, obviously, as its main ability, so we'll get an additional with Adrix and Nev. This is also going to be one of our combo pieces. So we've added the Power Stone Shard to this deck, which is a mana rock that it taps to add a colorless for each artifact you control named Power Stone Shard. So if you have enough Power Stone Shards out, you can essentially make infinite Power Stone Shards. So you pay 7 mana, you make Power Stone Shard, and you'll make 2 of those tokens. So doing this combo is normally pretty hard, but because of Adrix and Nev giving you that additional copy, the amount of mana needed to start it up isn't as bad. So assuming you have 1, you pay the 7, you make 2 of them. So now you've got 3 Power Stone Shards, and they each tap for 3 mana. So now you only need 1 more mana. So essentially for 8 mana, plus the 3 mana you have to use for cast this, you will make infinite mana. And from there, you can make, you can make infinite Meteor Golems, or you could make infinite Spine of Ishaz. You could put all that mana into a Staff of Domination. A lot of really cool things that we could do once we get that infinite mana with the Cogwork assembler. We've still got some of these artifact mana dork type mirror, and just to kind of keep on theme with that mirror. And we've also added a mirror galvanizer, which is another one of our combo pieces in this deck. So it's got pay 1, untap each other mirror you control, and this creature is a mirror. So if we make a token copy of mirror galvanizer, they're going to untap each other. So if we have, if you have just 1 mirror that can tap for mana, you will be able to just untap your mirror infinitely. Where it gets cool is when you have, the ability to create more than 1 mana. So if you got a couple of these dudes out, or just the Palladium mirror, we'll be able to create infinite mana. And since we can make token copies of our other mirror mana dorks, hitting that shouldn't be too hard. And again, once we hit that infinite mana, we can do the crazy shenanigans that I was talking about earlier. If we got a Cogwork assembler, we can just make a bunch of infinite hasty dudes. We can, draw our deck with Staff of Domination. We could use Urza with the pay 5 and cast our entire deck. A lot of really interesting stuff. We could do that. Then we've got the Fairy Artisans, which is a Fairy Artificer. And whenever a non-token creature enters the battlefield under an opponent's control, we get to make a copy of that creature. So with Adrix and Nev, we're going to be making 2 copies of that creature. There's a lot of value that we can get out of this card. Jin-Jataxias, Progress Tyrant, another really cool card from the Neon Dynasty set. So whenever you cast an artifact, instant, or sorcery spell, copy that spell, and you may choose new targets for the copy. This ability triggers only once each turn. And whenever an opponent casts an artifact, instant, or sorcery spell, counter that spell. This ability triggers only once each turn. Kodoth the Forge Master can let us search up for any artifact as long as we sacrifice 3 artifacts, which isn't too hard considering how many artifacts we have in the deck, and since we have ways to make tokens of our artifacts, so not bad. Perilous Mirror is still in the deck, and once we get the infinite mana and we can kill off our Perilous Mirror, we can do infinite damage to the table. Parcel Mirror can let us draw our deck. If we can make a bunch of them with the Cogwork assembler, you've probably already won since you can just swing at people with the Parcel Mirror, but style points aren't too bad. Still got the Mirror Battle Sphere, it's just a great win condition. We've added a Psy, Master Thopterist, which, whenever you cast an artifact spell, you make a 1/1 colorless Thopter, and with Adrix and Nev, you'll make 2. And then you can also sacrifice 2 artifacts to draw a card, so some decent card advantage we can get out of there. We've got a Trophy Mage, which can search for any 3 costs artifact in our deck, and Mirror Galvanizer is 3 mana, Cogwork Assembler is 3 mana, our Mirror Welder is 3 mana, which is also a combo piece in this deck. And then we've added an Urza Lord High Artificer, which makes an artifact creature token when it enters the battlefield. And it also is just an infinite mana outlet. So, and speaking of the Mirror Welder from before, we actually now have an infinite combo that we can perform with this card once we get a Gilded Lotus and a Staff of Domination. But once you do that, you can tap to make 3 mana of any one color, and then you can pay 1 to untap the Mirror Welder, essentially making infinite mana. And then with that infinite mana, you can use all of the other Staff of Domination abilities with your Mirror Welder, draw out your deck, and gain infinite life, all that jazz. Moving on to our sorceries, we still got the Echo Storm. I think this card's really cool. A few tutors. We got the Reshape, which can let us search for any artifact in our deck. Fabricate can also let us search. This one puts it into our hand instead of into the battlefield. And an Eldritch Evolution. In the instance, we have changed things a little bit around, added a few more efficient spells like Pongify and Negate, added a Heroic Intervention. Cyclonic Rift is really good. Erase Sculpt, so we can hit exile an artifact or a creature. Then we've also added a Word of Invention, just another tutor. Spell Swindle I think is really cool. You have to hold up 5 mana, so that's kind of iffy. But you make X colorless treasure tokens, where X is the spell's converted mana cost that you counter. So with Adrix and Nev, you'll get double those tokens. It'll be a great time. And moving on to the artifacts, we've got a new card from Streets of New Capenna. There's probably an auto-include in Adrix and Nev decks anyway, but it's an artifact, and it has artifact synergy, so I wanted to throw it in. It's an artifact, 6 mana artifact with lands you control, have tap, create a treasure token, and with Adrix and Nev, we're going to make 2 treasures. So essentially, it's a mana doubler in this deck. Super sweet card. I like it a lot. We've also added Ashnod's Altar and Krark Clan Ironworks as sacrifice outlets for our artifacts in case someone wants to exile them or something like that. And it's also, if we make infinite mana, we can basically loop Spine of Ishsaw. So when it enters the battlefield, destroy target permanent, and when Spine of Ishsaw is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, return it to its owner's hand. So with the Spine and the Krark with infinite mana, you can just destroy all permanents on the battlefield. Pretty good. Moon Silver Key is a way for us to tutor out our Power Stone Shard or the Gilded Lotus or something like that. And we've also added a Nim Death Mantle, and this is going to be another one of our combo pieces. So depending on which one we have out, whether it's Krark Clan Ironworks or the Ashnod's Altar, we can make infinite mana with the Nim Death Mantle. So whenever a non-token creature is put into your graveyard from the battlefield, you may pay 4. If you do, return that card to the battlefield and attach Nim Death Mantle to it. So with our Ashnod's Altar, we can sacrifice our Mirror Battlesphere, make 2 mana, assuming if we have some other of the mirrors that it made out still, sacrifice that mirror as well, and from there we will make infinite mirror and potentially infinite mana. So pretty good, and it also works with either Krark Clan Ironworks or Ashnod's Altar. With the Ashnod's, we can also do it with the Urza, because Adrix and Nev is going to let Urza make 2 of those artifacts when it enters the battlefield. The Wormcoil Engine can also do this as well. So you'll sacrifice your Wormcoil Engine and you'll get 2 different triggers. So Wormcoil Engine death trigger on the stack and the Nim Death Mantle trigger, they'll both be on the stack. And you basically just let the Wormcoil Engine resolve first to make the worm tokens, and then you sacrifice the worm tokens to make 2 more mana, and then you can use that mana into the Nim Death Mantle to bring back the Wormcoil Engine. And then from there, with the infinite mana, you can do whatever else we have in the deck to do with infinite mana, whether it be the staff, or from there you can loop Spine of Ishsaw. You can make infinite hasty tokens with the Cogwork Assembler, whatever outlet you have. This deck is kind of dense in terms of combos, but these combos are all kind of, they require multiple pieces, multiple moving pieces, and some outlet in addition to those moving pieces. We've also kept the Mirrodin Besieged I think it's a cool card. Whenever you cast an artifact, you get that 1/1, or you can use it as a win condition, either or. Moving on to the lands, we've added a good bit of utility lands. We got stuff like Buried Ruin, Academy Ruins. Both of these can recur artifacts from our graveyard. We've still got the Mirror Pool. We've added a Treasure Vault, which is an artifact in addition to being a land, so we can copy it with stuff like Mirror Works. And then we can, it makes treasure tokens, so with the Adrix and Nev, you'll be able to get even more treasure tokens. And then we finally got an Urza Saga. The card's super sweet, especially with the second ability, since you can pay 2 and make a construct. You'll make 2 of those constructs, and you could really start beating some face with this card. And you can also search your library for a 0 or 1 cost. We don't have too many of those in the deck. I think it's pretty much Soul Ring, but if you wanted to add more, you definitely could. I've got it in here more for the ability for us to make tokens. Before we move on to the glory version of Adrix and Nev, if you enjoy my content and you think you've gained a little bit more perspective on power levels in EDH, go ahead and like, subscribe, and leave a comment below letting me know what commander you'd like to see next. And with the glory version of Adrix and Nev, this one's kind of tough because generally you want your commander to be able to contribute some kind of value, or it is a win condition in and of itself as some kind of outlet for an infinite mana combo, or whether it is a combo. And Adrix and Nev doesn't really provide that too much, so we're gonna kind of go with a we're gonna try to utilize the ability. It's not gonna be like an Adrix and Nev focused deck. It's just gonna be a decently strong deck that can utilize Adrix and Nev, as a supplementary kind of thing. So we've got the Narset Pardo Veils and the Oko Thief of Crowns. Both of these cards are pretty decent in the context of cEDH. Narset, we can do the Windfall shenanigans, and then Oko turns off a lot of really important creatures that our opponents will be casting. In our creature section, we've got the the usual suspects, stuff like Arbor Elf, Birth of Paradise, Llanowar Elves, just to make our ramp a little bit more consistent. Destiny Spinner makes our enchantments and creatures uncounterable, super strong. And then we kind of went with a little bit of a Staxy version, and you'll see that when we get down to the artifacts and enchantments. So we've got a few cards that can kind of just get carried away if they're not really answered. So Elder Gargaroth, Vigilance Reach Trample to 6/6, create a 3/3 beast creature token, gain 3 life, or you draw a card when you attack or block with this big guy. So if you've got the table kind of locked down, this card's going to do a lot of work, especially if you have Adrix and Nev making the 2 3/3s instead of the normal 1. So definitely going to put a beat down on our opponents. Jin-Gitaxias, still a super strong card. It's pretty costly, but still super worth it. Countering the first artifact, instant or sorcery our opponents cast in cEDH is pretty backbreaking. So then we've got Coma, Cosmos Serpent. It's a 7 mana, can't be countered. At the beginning of each upkeep, you make a 3/3 blue serpent creature token named Coma's Coil. So with Adrix and Nev, every upkeep we're going to be making 2 3/3 serpents, which is pretty dope. You can sacrifice another serpent to tap target permanent. Its activated abilities can't be activated this turn, or Coma, Cosmos Serpent, gains indestructible until the end of turn. Makes it a little bit hard for our opponents to interact with Coma outside of a Swords of Plowshares or something like that. The best part about it, though, is the first activated ability when you sacrifice a serpent. Being able to tap down any permanent and stop that permanent from activating its abilities is kind of nuts. You can do this on enchantments, so if your opponent has an Earthcraft, or if they have a Survival of the Fittest, this card will stop that because it's any permanent. Stuff like Icecrown Scepter, if they're trying to do a Dramatic Reversal combo, this will stop that as well. Especially since it taps it down, so in response to the imprint trigger to put Dramatic Reversal underneath it, you can tap down that scepter, and then they want to, even if they figure out a way to untap it, they won't be able to use it for the rest of the turn. Tindershoot Dryad, another way for us to kind of carry away a game, because at each upkeep you're going to make a 1/1 green sapling creature token, and as long as you have Ascended, each of those saplings is going to get +2/+2. So every upkeep you're making 6 power worth of creatures. Not bad. Then we've got Tireless Provisioner and Tireless Tracker, both pretty cool creatures in the context of this deck, since we'll be making 2 of the tokens when our lands enter the battlefield. Then we've got a Thrasios, just a decent way for us to sink mana into if we don't, have much else to do. We've got a decent amount of instants and sorceries in this deck, so we can play the control game really well if we get this guy out early. And then we've got Thassa's Oracle as one of our win conditions. Since we are playing this like grindy stacks your kind of deck, we do want some kind of way to efficiently close out the game. Beats isn't always going to get us there, so we have a card called Thought Lash in our enchantments. So cumulative upkeep, remove the top card of your library from the game. If you do not, remove your library from the game and bury Thought Lash. Or we can pay 0 and remove the top card of your library from the game to prevent 1 damage to you. So essentially, if we have our Thought Lash out and we cast our Thassa's Oracle, the Oracle resolves, and then in response to its trigger, you just exile your entire library with the activated ability of Thought Lash, and then you'll win the game because there will be no cards in your library. Moving on to the sorceries, we've got a Natural Order, so we can cheat in our Coma or an Elder Gargaroth or a Tindershoot Dryad, but it's primarily here for the Coma. This card's super powerful, especially at 4 mana. Eldritch Evolution, again, a really great tutor, and a Finale of Devastation, another fantastic tutor that can serve as an overrun if the game goes on long enough. In our instants, we've just souped up our instants and sorcery package. A lot of really strong cards: Fierce Guardianship, Fluster Storm, Force of Negation, a lot of stuff that you would expect to see at a cEDH table. We've also added long-term plans. There aren't a lot of ways for us to tutor for Thought Lash in the deck, so long-term plans is in here so we can tutor for Thought Lash. War of Invention, another tutor, just more removal, more efficient tutoring and protection. Moving on to the artifacts, definitely slimmed down our artifacts from the other 2 versions. Just some ramp and a Tangle Wire to kind of muddy up the board a little bit, especially if we can get some of those tokens going. So at the beginning of each player's upkeep, that player taps an untapped artifact, creature, or land he or she controls for each fade counter on Tangle Wire, and it's got fading 4. So first go around, each player's got to tap 4 things, and then you'll only have to tap 3 because there are 2 triggers on the stack during your upkeep: 1 to remove the fading counter from Tangle Wire, and 1 to tap down your stuff. So you resolve the fading first and remove the counter, and then you only tap down 3 things. So everyone's going to have to tap 1 more thing than you are going to have to every turn rotation. Moving on to the enchantments. Like I said, we got a few ways to kind of stack the board out just a little bit with Back to Basics and a Stasis. So with the Stasis, players can't untap, and you pay 1 during your upkeep, or you sacrifice the Stasis. So if we have, an Elder Gargaroth out or a Coma, this just buys us a few turns to just make a bunch of tokens potentially. And Urza can help us as well, since we can tap out our other artifacts for extra mana. So if we're doing like Tireless Tracker and we're playing lands, or Tireless Provisioner, this will let us maintain that stasis lock for a little bit longer, especially if we've got the the Tangle Wire out as well. Dance of the Many, another really cool card. So when it comes into play, you create a token of a creature, and then you make a token of it. When that token leaves, Dance of Many leaves, and when Dance of Many leaves the battlefield, the token you created leaves the battlefield as well. During your upkeep, you pay 2 mana, 2 blue mana specifically, where you bury Dance of the Many. So essentially for 2 mana, we're going to make 2 tokens because of Adrix and Nev, and that's pretty good. Even making 2 Elder Gargaroths or 2 Tindershoot Dryads is gonna do a lot of work. Then we've got Earthcraft plus Squirrel's Nest. So if we enchant a basic land with Squirrel's Nest, that basic land will be able to tap to make a 1/1. It'll make 2 1/1s. We have Adrix and Nev out. And then with Earthcraft, we can tap an untapped creature we control to untap target basic land. So we essentially use the squirrel that we created with Squirrel's Nest to untap the land, and then we can tap the land and make another squirrel. And we can do this back and forth infinitely. Basically, you wait until the instep of your opponent before it's your turn, and you make your infinite squirrels, and then you untap and you kill the table with infinite squirrels. With Adrix and Nev, though, you'll actually make infinite mana with this because you'll make the 2 squirrels. So the 1 squirrel will be able to untap the land, and then you'll make 2 more squirrels. So you'll always end up with an extra squirrel left over every time, and that will let you create infinite mana. And with that infinite mana, you can like cast your entire deck with Urza, or you can draw out your entire deck with Thrasios, and then one with Thassa's Oracle. So instead of having to wait a turn rotation with the Squirrel Nest plus Earthcraft on board, you can just win right on the spot. Then we've added a Survival of the Fittest, so we can trigger up creatures that we want to, and just a few of the really strong draw spells like Sylvan Library, Mystic Remora, and a Rhystic Study. Moving on to the lands. Nothing too crazy since we do have the back to basics. We've still got a good bit of basics in here. A few fetch lands so we can tutor up our Mystic Sanctuary and just make sure that we're color fixing decently. Plus we still got the Urza Saga. We don't have as much artifact stuff going on, but this card just does a lot on its own. I mean, even if you're just going to search for the Mana Crypt or a Soul Ring, still going to be super strong, especially with these constructs. These constructs are very deceptive. Not every game of cEDH is going to be super fast or end really quickly, and so this card can do a lot of work with these constructs, especially with Adrix and Nev out. You'll essentially, if you activate this, for the 2 times for the 2 turns that you have the level 2 active, you're going to make 4 constructs, and they're each going to be at least 4/4. So it's super strong and a decent way for you to, beat people down, especially like the mono black type of decks or the decks that are running add-ons, that kind of stuff. Thanks for checking out this episode of Wave MTG. Again, I'm your host Jacob, and if you want to support the channel, I have started a Fiverr. So if you have an EDH deck and you want to see where it falls on the power level scale, or at least in the context of my power levels, go check it out. For $5, you submit your deck, and I will evaluate its power level, and I will also give you feedback on what you can do to better fit that power level or move up and down depending on what you are looking for. It's $5 per deck, and that's the lowest I could charge. I would charge like $1 or $2 if I could. But yeah, just more ways for me to give back to the community, and also a way for you to support the channel without just having to throw money at me and not get anything back. So I'm in the process of getting that set up. I will have the link in the description below. Again, thanks for watching, and until next time.